What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in? Story 1. When I was in 2nd grade, my brother and I would always be picked up after school by my dad. We had a green van with a red stripe on the side. So my brother grabs my hand and storms us up to the car. He rips open the door, sits us down, buckles me in, and then says, "Can we get McDonald's on the way home?" We both look up and there is 2 middle-aged adults sitting in the front seat that are obviously not our family. They stare at us, we stare at them. In my little brain we've been staring at each other for at least 10 minutes at this point. My brother unbuckles me, unbuckles himself, we get out and walk away. No words were exchanged. We then checked who was in the car before getting in from that point forward. Story 2. I walked in on my roommate in senior year of college banging his girlfriend. We had a rule about a hat on the door if we wanted privacy. There was no hat when I came back one morning and I got a full, eye-level, side view of him and her mid-thrust because he had the top bunk. They kind of laughed it off but was pretty awkward for me. Story 3. I was sitting in class and the kid next to me farted and I said, "God bless you," as if it were a sneeze. Story 4. I was looking at my mom's phone because she wanted to show me some pictures from what she did that weekend. I swiped one too many times and came across one of her nudes. I felt my soul jolt out of my body seeing that shiz. Story 5. I am someone who never feels awkward and doesn't get embarrassed, but this moment got me good. I was doing orientation for my college. I wanted to meet the dean of my department and make a good impression. I walk in his office and he is bent over behind his desk looking for something. I introduce myself and stick my hand out to shake his hand. He sits up and he has no arms. I look at him and look at my hand and I am freaking out. It felt like my hand was out there for an eternity and I did the only thing I could think of to do. I ran my hand through my hair and tried to play it off. He never said anything and just started talking to me, but I felt like I was actually going to die of embarrassment. Story 6. I was in some business college class and the professor was talking about something related to how celebrities brand themselves. Someone in the class brought up Shaun White as someone who had great celebrity branding but isn't really talked about a lot. The professor was Indian and said he wasn't familiar with who that was. So my genius thought it would be perfect to say out loud, "I'm talking about Mountain Dew's Baby," as a joke reference to that newscast where Shaun White said he had been drinking all night, but was underage, and the news person asked him what he meant, so he responded with, "I'm talking about Mountain Dew's Baby." Well, no one seemed to knew about that, or at least didn't think it was funny, as silence rang through the classroom and professor awkwardly moved on to a new topic. Truly the most awkward situation I've been in and also the worst haunting moment of my life. Story 7. I was at a funeral for one of my husband's relatives. On my way in, an employee of the funeral home asked me when I was due. I wasn't pregnant, but I am fat and was wearing an Empire waistcoat, so I wasn't offended. As I signed the guest book, I corrected her and tried to defuse the situation with a joke about burning that coat later. But she just wouldn't stop. She kept trying to apologize and explain herself, and I just wanted to run away. Then, I was stuck in a small room with her for the next 2 hours. Story 8. I was interviewing for a big promotion at my old job. I had put in the time, the hours, and the effort for this promotion, and I had been passed up a few times, so I was sending out resumes while trying to get this promotion. I go through the first interview, and everything seemed great. They invited me for the second interview. I was so excited. Flash forward 2 days, and I go in for the interview. The interview is with the regional and site managers. Everything is going great. They are asking me, what are your priorities, goals, etc. At the end, the site manager changes his posture and says, "Would you say that you're a loyal employee?" Taken aback, I say, "Of course, I've been here almost 2 years." And like a shark circling his prey, this dude turns his computer monitor around and shows me my private Facebook posts that I posted that I was in the market for a job in the same field. Now, there's no way he could have seen this, as it was a friends-only post. Someone I work with had to have tattled on me here. He then proceeds to read them to me out loud, not only the posts about my job search, but personal posts about my health situation and questions that I didn't bring up to anybody other than personal friends. I look at the regional manager and this guy won't look me in the eyes, he is shifting, obviously uncomfortable. I tried to say that I was looking just in case this promotion didn't work out, as I am a college student paying my way through school, but he kept interrupting me and saying, "Loyalty is key." He then tells me, "We will think about it," and points toward the door. The regional manager kind of coughs and goes to shake my hand, but by that point I was already out the door. So I said, "Thanks anyways," and then proceed to have the most uncomfortable walk back to my desk, with coworkers asking for the details if I got the promotion. Story 9. My last ex before my husband wanted to stay friends even though we had a messy breakup and I left him. I thought he would want me to duck off, but he kept insisting that we still hang out as friends. Out of guilt I obliged. Over time, he started seeing someone else and then he still kept getting me to hang out with them. I couldn't tell if things were getting more weird or less weird, so I obliged. One evening, I am hanging out with my ex at their place. His new girlfriend comes home from work and looks kinda nervous. Before I know it, she launches into this story about having just hooked up with a coworker. At this point, I am desperately wishing to get the F out. My ex was visibly upset and they had a huge fight about it right in front of me. During the fight it also came out that they had been trying to groom me for a threesome. That was the last time I saw them. But they are still together. Story 10. When I was a kid, we were on holiday and decided to go to a church. While we were there, I decided that it would be funny if I would slap my dad's backside with both hands. So, I ran in full speed to maximize the impact of the slap. I ended up slapping a stranger who also happened to walk next to a woman with a stroller in his hands, which made me think it was my dad. It was even worse that my parents saw it as well. Story 11. One time in college, I snuck into my resident assistant's room and hid under the blanket on his top bunk. My goal was to scare him when he comes in and settled down a bit. He ended up coming in with his girlfriend and began making out with her. After a good, lifetime, couple moments, I jumped up and ran out. No saving it. Story 12. Most George Costanza moment of my life. I was flying back home from a business trip in GA. Before we all got on the airplane, everyone noticed that we would be flying with 3 military canines and their handlers. All good. Point being, everyone noticed them, and if they hadn't, the pilot was kind enough to point them out when he came over the intercom to give his spiel. A round of applause for our service members and their brave working dogs was given. Hours later in the flight crew had turned off the lights. I needed to take a piss and moved forward in the cabin toward the restrooms. Well, one of the dogs was black and I didn't see his paw sticking into the aisle. Cue the dog yelping and crying. Have you ever had 150 people hate you before? It was made so much worse by the fact that I am a veteran and I love dogs. I am the son of a veteran who was a canine handler when he served. But how the heck am I going to explain that to a plane load of people giving me the stink eye for being the jackass who stepped on the dog? Story 13. My family's not super religious, but when I was about 13, they decided to go to synagogue on Purim for some reason. Part of Purim involves reading from the book of Esther, which has a part about Esther coming to see the king while he's sitting on his throne in the throne room, and when he sees her, he stands up and extends the golden scepter. When the rabbi got to that part, my 13-year-old brain pictured Esther coming to see the king while he's sitting on the crapper and burst out laughing. No one else laughed. Instead, everyone turned to stare at me and I had to explain myself to an entire room of people. We now celebrate Purim in the comfort of my parents' home. Story 14. I was riding in the passenger seat with my mom, who has always been strict and very tight-knit several years ago. For some reason, she decided to completely open up to me about all of her drug experimentation and adult exploits in the 60s and the time she did with Steve Jobs at a fancy restaurant in the 80s. It was a very uncomfortable eye-opener and I was trapped listening to it. Story 15. When I was a kid, my family's van broke down, so we all had to squeeze into my dad's car to go to a funeral. Anyways, my older sister had to sit on my lap. Yep, you guessed it. I got a boner and she freaked out and started screaming. Story 16. I was in the car with my girlfriend's best friend's mom and her other daughter. We made talk in the car and I just ended up asking what their favorite color was. They then told me the other daughter was actually blind. I had barely known these people and was in the car for another 20 minutes with them. Most awkward 20 of my life. Story 17. A gentleman was outside the hotel smoking in his jogging pants riddled with holes. I really wanted to tell him his balls were showing, but I couldn't summon the courage to do it. He wanted to chat about Magic the Gathering. Story 18. Okay, so me and some friends were at a restaurant and a buddy of mine was telling us about this new girl he just started going out with a few days back. Well, another friend then started telling us about this girl that he'd banged the previous night. The conversation went on for a minute, and finally somebody asked for the name of the girl that he had banged, and it turns out it was a girl that the other friend had started dating a few days earlier. Q narrowly avoided fight as we convinced him it's better to find out she's slutty now, rather than later. The two guys still no longer speak though. Story 19. I once followed a man out of a grocery store, across a small parking lot, and tried to get into his car with him because I thought it was my dad. Didn't figure out my mistake until I saw him look across the top of the car at me trying to get into the passenger side with a super confused look on his face. Cue my actual dad running up breathlessly, waving his hands and yelling at me. Story 20. I used to run a restaurant and had inherited an employee with a slew of mental health issues. She had massive anxiety issues and just couldn't handle the pressure of working in a restaurant. She'd break down and cry over simple mistakes if she felt she was making too many. It was extremely unfortunate, but I was terribly underprepared to coach someone like that. One day, during downtime, the cooks were shooting the crap and recounting stories of weird ex-coworkers. I opened up my yap and said, who was the one who kept crying every time they'd screw up? She was 2 feet away and literally responded with, me. Story 21. When I was pregnant, I gained a lot of weight. One day, while I was very, very pregnant, I was riding up an elevator and someone on the other side waved at me as they were coming down. I did not know them, but I'm friendly, so I waved back. They then realized their mistake and came up to explain. They said, "I'm sorry, you looked like my wife." To which I replied, "Oh. When is she due?" His wife wasn't pregnant. If you've gotten this far and enjoying the content, please leave a comment of your own story. We'd love to make a video of them in the future. Story 22. I served for a couple years and worked multiple restaurants in that time frame. I worked at a Denny's, night shift, best and worst job for many reasons. Anyways, there was a regular that came in often, drunk as a skunk and nasty as heck. He tipped really well but was so nasty to us girls. It never fazed me, so I served him often. He offered many times to pay for extra service and tried to get me to leave with him often. Of course I never did, but a couple months later I'm working a new place which was a little more high-end. I work mornings here, and this was a Sunday morning church rush. Guess who was sat in my section? My nasty regular from my last job with his entire family. His wife, kids, parents, the whole group, fresh out of church. The look on this man's face when I walked up and said hello. He was red as a fire truck, and I made it worse by asking if he remembered me. He left me a huge tip, probably because I didn't bring up his nasty mouth and grabby hands from his late drunken nights. Story 22. I was a teenager with a boner, pretty standard so far. I walked downstairs and had to tuck it in my pajamas so the head is sticking straight up and the erection is pinned against the body so the boner isn't noticeable. Well, when I put my t-shirt on, it fell behind the tip, so if you looked at my waistline you could clearly see the tip. I was talking to my mom for a few minutes and she was flushed, red in the face and quickly trying to kill the conversation, not something my mom is known for. I walked away, saw what was going on and didn't know what the heck to do. We never discussed it, but because things were so awkward at dinner, I'm pretty sure my mom knew that I realized it happened as well. Story 24. This poor girl walked into my lecture by mistake about halfway through. This particular professor really enjoys talking to all of his students and was super engaging even with 400+ students in his class. When the girl walked in, my professor stopped teaching, looked at the girl and asked if she was in the class. She said she was and began walking towards the front where the open seats were. This is a fairly large lecture hall, and all 200 students were now forced to watch this poor girl walk towards a seat because the professor didn't continue talking and just stared at her. She got close to the front, and I think the pressure of the whole room got to her and she said, "Actually no, I'm not," and then turned around and we all had to watch this poor girl climb back up the stairs and out of the hall. I was literally watching my worst nightmare. Story 25. I did community service with a youth group when I was around 10 or 11. Around the Christmas holiday, we bought and wrapped a bunch of gifts to take to an old folks' home. I pick up a gift and walk over to this elderly gentleman. I'm swelling with pride and eager to drink in the large glass of thank yous I'm about to be served. He opens a really nice pair of slippers and looks at them for a moment and says, "What the heck am I supposed to do with these?" "You put them on your feet," I delightfully exclaim. He then responds, "I haven't had feet since Vietnam." Story 26. In the cinema. I interlocked my fingers with the kid sitting beside me for a full minute. Turns out, he wasn't my kid. Story 27. Wife and I went to Europe for our honeymoon. We were in a train station in Amsterdam and I had to use the bathroom. I walked into the toilet stall and saw there was toilet paper in the bowl but didn't think anything of it. I did my business and when I tried to flush, it didn't go down. In a panic I flushed again and this only resulted in the water becoming dangerously close to the rim of the bowl. I said to heck with it and started to leave. However, right outside the stall was a bathroom attendant. He looked over at me and started yelling at me asking why was I clogging up the toilet. He was blocking me from leaving and all these other people in the bathroom looked in at us. God, it was so embarrassing I wanted to die. I eventually muttered sorry and brushed past him and ran out of the bathroom. Story 28. At the airport, I woke up as the elevator door is closing and there is a woman inside with a stroller. I slowed down because I wasn't in a hurry and would rather catch the next one. Then, I saw a little girl about 2 or 3 is playing in a flower pot thing nearby. I realized she was likely meant to be on the elevator with her mom, but the doors are closed by the time I put it together. I walk up to her and said, "Did your mommy get in the elevator?" She just shyly smiles. I sit down with her and decide to wait in place for a few minutes for the mom to realize. A minute or 2 later, a man walks up and says, "Excuse me, can I have child?" in a thick Russian accent. I was trying to decide what to ask to figure out if she was his kid, when the elevator door reopened and the woman came flying out yelling for the girl. She hops up happily and runs over to the mom. I stared at the guy with an accusing look, then he turned and got in the elevator too. I don't know what the heck was going on there. Was he with them? Did he think I was trying to take their kid? Was he a creeper following them? So awkward. I literally sat silent through the whole weird encounter. Story 29. Got on an elevator with a woman and she had on these really nice boots, so I complimented them by saying, "Nice boots." She cups her breasts and says, "Well, you're not shy, thank you, they are real," and then immediately realized I said boots. She thought I said, "Nice boobs." Longest elevator ride ever. To this day, whenever I say boots in any context, I do so with a very hard deliberate T. Story 30. It was my first time voting in a presidential election in 2016 since becoming old enough to do so, and polling place was at a library. When I get to the front of the line and start filling out the required papers, I mention it's my first time and asked what to do next. After hearing this, the woman who was working there and helping me raised her voice and said, "Hey everyone, we've got a first-time voter here," and started clapping so they all would clap as well. Nobody clapped and I was just standing there really embarrassed before quietly saying, "Can I just go vote now?" Story 31. When I was a teenager, my friends and I would spend the weekends staying up late playing video games and eating junk food. I was also a cross-country runner, and on this particular night I was experiencing some extreme chafing from a long run earlier that day. While we were at the gas station getting Doritos and energy drinks, I announced to who I thought was my friend, "Man, my nipples really hurt." Upon realizing it was a complete stranger with whom I had just shared this intimate detail, I simply stared at him and said, "You're not my friend," and walked away. I didn't go back to that gas station for a long time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Thread Talk for more content like this. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out. Have a dope day and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers!